Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so the Democrats have caved on the shutdown. I believe on the 40th day, a deal was reached amongst several Democrats in the Senate. I believe 8 Democrats in the Senate voted on a deal that would essentially extend the functioning of the government through January. And then I suppose this whole fight starts over again. In the meantime, there will be a perfunctory vote on these ACA credits in December, as well as some other healthcare issue that's kind of a more vague thing that I don't even think is in the ink of this deal, that there will be some issue about healthcare of the Democrats choosing that will be voted on, that the Senate will put up for a vote, as well as the reinstatement of the federal employees that Trump fired, and full funding of SNAP benefits. So that is the deal that these 8 Democrats have accepted. Chuck Schumer is not one of the Democrats who voted for this, and there is a loud chorus of opposition to voting for this deal, because broadly, whether it's the base, whether it's people in the party, whether it's, journalists in DC or random influencers, everybody understands that this shutdown was the only leverage that Democrats had, and they've thrown it away. And it was working. It was working in their favor, and they've gotten rid of it. So we'll see if we end up back at this same place once it comes back, because this is just a continuing resolution to fund the government through until January. So really, it seems like they just wanted to clear up this whole issue of like the holidays. Are people going to be able to travel for the holidays? You have airlines grounding flights, air traffic control, chaos because people are being laid off, and myriad of other problems, including SNAP benefits in various states, that is causing, a lot of panic. The longer a government shutdown goes on, the more sort of chaos it opens up. But the thing here is that everybody understood that this is Republicans' fault. And this was falling on the Republicans. And it was the same method that Republicans used against Obama during his term, is that by shutting down the government, everybody's just going to blame the president. And even Obama has acknowledged that that worked. That was an effective strategy. And it was working in favor of Democrats as well. But it seems like the way this deal came about is that even though Schumer didn't vote for it, he definitely orchestrated it, because all of these Democrats who voted for this are not up for re-election. Either they're up for re-election in 2028 or in 2030, or they're not even running again. And Chuck Schumer, as somebody who recognizes that he's more vulnerable, came out and publicly said that he does not support this. Hakeem Jeffries also said, we're going to keep fighting this in the House. But the reality is Chuck Schumer's the leader of the party. This deal would not have gotten passed without him supporting it. That's just objectively true. His whip, his Senate Minority Whip, Dick Durbin, was one of the Democrats who voted for this. And the party is not having it. He's facing a ton of backlash, and you got a lot of voices, like including establishment Democrat voices, that are now saying that Schumer needs to be primaried. Brian Tyler Cohen, who was recently embroiled in this controversy of taking dark money that's affiliated with like very establishment Democratic causes, he is coming out saying he's looking forward to a robust primary season. You've got a lot of people that are in the more moderate wing of the Democratic Party, but also have enough of a detachment from the politics as usual inner workings of the party to recognize that Democrats need to fight more than they do. So when you see Gavin Newsom doing the redistricting, or you see Democrats standing up and doing this government shutdown, people recognized that this was Democrats effectively using their leverage. And by caving, Chuck Schumer has reaffirmed what everybody knows about Democrats, is that they always cave. They're not willing to actually pick these fights. And it's part of the reason that Trump has as much leverage as he does. If Democrats were using every single lever of power at their disposal to oppose Trump, let the immediate consequences be damned, because the long-term consequences of an unrestrained Trump presidency is much worse for everyone. And so the base wanted Democrats to fight on those terms, that, this isn't just about saying, well, at least they haven't destroyed every capability of the government to feed some people, so that's a win for us. At least they haven't fired every single federal employee, so that's a win for us. But rather to say, no, this agenda that you have is wrong, it will hurt people, and so we're not going to allow you to do it. That's what this ACA subsidies fight amounted to. And that's why even people who weren't as concerned with the details of it were able to be rallied to the Democrat side and to blame Republicans for this shutdown, because they recognize broadly that Republicans are always doing things that take meaningful care and meaningful benefits away from the average person in the name of austerity or whatever, despite the fact that under Trump, the Republican Party is not an austerity party. And so they rally behind this pushback to not allow the government to function as long as Republicans are going to do that. So broadly, the understanding in the Democratic Party is that they should have held the line on this. Schumer is most definitely going to feel the pain of it. And it seems to me that the way this is going to pan out is, now that the filibuster has been overcome, and Republicans have cleared that obstacle, this just has to go back to the House and then get signed by the president. That is what's going to allow the government to open back up. And then what's in this deal is that they're going to vote about the Affordable Care Act tax credits in December, which again, that's completely up to Republicans if they want to hold that vote. And it's also in this agreement that the federal employees who were fired by Trump will be reinstated, as well as SNAP benefits being fully funded. So that's great, except it's just a reversal of what Trump did during the shutdown. These are not employees who were fired because of Doge or anything before that. This is just a reversal of what Trump did in order to exercise his leverage. So all they've done is shown that that was effective leverage utilized against them. It did effectively pressure them to end the shutdown. And all it took to get them to do so was to say, we'll undo the things that we did because of the government shutdown. So after this goes through the House and then Trump signs it, the government will reopen and they will continue quibbling about this funding situation. And if I'm not mistaken, the vote will happen again in January. So this is a continuing resolution to temporarily continue funding the government. This is what Republicans were wanting the whole time. Democrats were holding out and saying, we are not going to sign a continuing resolution because that's going to allow you to advance this legislation that cuts these Affordable Care Act tax subsidies. So now that Democrats have given up that leverage, it may very well come back around to another shutdown after the holiday season. And maybe Democrats are looking at it like that, like it's easier for them to hold out at that point. But it also opens up plenty of time in the meantime for Republicans to continue business as usual and probably set up plans to get rid of the filibuster quickly if it looks like they're not able to reach the type of deal with Democrats in the meantime between now and January that would get Democrats to vote in favor of their bill. So it's most likely that Republicans are now going to create a situation where they can pass their budget bill, their yearly budget bill, not a continuing resolution, but full funding of the government for another year without Democratic support. That is what I assume Republicans will do from this point because Democrats have allowed them to do that. They were in a position where they could end the filibuster, but they're doing it in the midst of this chaos of the government shutdown. And the reality is Republicans don't want to get rid of the filibuster, just like Democrats don't. And if you ask me, it seems that probably one of the main things that motivated Democrats to move with some urgency, along with this whole, holiday season thing and the fact that the air traffic situation is getting genuinely a little frightening, but probably a little bit of panic over the idea of the filibuster going away. And that's where I think they made a mistake because the filibuster, if Republicans want to get rid of that, they're going to fucking get rid of that. And all you've done here is shown weakness. And So we'll see if this is just the same fight deferred until the beginning of the next year. If so, then I think Democrats should reassume the exact same position and hold it and not fold. And Chuck Schumer did seem, after he folded initially at the beginning of 2025 on this initial funding bill that allowed for the Doge cuts and all that, Chuck Schumer folded back then as well. And the party loudly admonished him for it. And now the same thing's happening again, but it's even worse. And that's why you see Chuck Schumer doing this little maneuver where he says, well, I voted against this, but, I can't control what these other Democrats do, of course. And so it's possible that because the backlash to this is even stronger than Chuck Schumer might have anticipated it would be, it might lead to him taking a little bit of a different strategy or posture when this fight comes back around. But like I said, Republicans likely won't even give them the opportunity to do that. In other words, they gave up their leverage, and Republicans are probably not going to allow them to get that leverage back. That's why this was a mistake. So it's time to start talking, and many people within the Democratic Party are talking about what it looks like to replace Chuck Schumer. You have some prominent Democrats like Ro Khanna in the House that are calling for Chuck Schumer to step down. Like I said, many voices are now talking about primaries for Chuck Schumer. People have already been suggesting AOC primary Chuck Schumer for a while now. She's being very quiet about whether or not there's any merit to that claim. But she's also decisively on the side that, leadership needs to behave differently than this. And people want somebody who is going to fight the Republican Party. And yes, it's going to be messy. They're going to do things like hold people's lives, people's livelihood, people's ability to eat in the balance. That's the reality. That's what we're up against with these people. If you back off in the face of that, they're just going to continue dangling that in your face and using it to back you down. And that's exactly what is going to happen now that all they've done is stave off this fight for a later date. So Chuck Schumer, much like the other Democrats that voted against this, all 8 of them were Democrats that are not up for re-election in 2026. That is not a coincidence. This is the sort of rotating villain strategy that people accuse Democrats of. Who is the person who's willing to take the fall so that the Democratic Party doesn't take any risks? So he's not up for re-election. People are calling for him to step down. So it's time for us to start talking about what it looks like to change out the leadership of this party. Hakeem Jeffries is up for re-election in 2026, and there has already been some speculation that an associate of Zohran Mamdani's might be planning to primary him. There's a little bit of reporting that Mamdani has tried to squash talk of that internally. That's mostly reporting, I believe, coming from the New York Post. So it's probably the billionaire class of New York trying to sow some discord within that coalition that very well could take over major flanks of the Democratic Party. It's also possible that Zohran does not want talk of a primary of Jeffries to be too closely associated with him as the mayor and what he's doing, at least for now. But I'll say has still expressed, support and solidarity with Mamdani publicly, as well as still signaling that he might have something up his sleeve in terms of a run. So out of all these people, Hakeem Jeffries is by far the most vulnerable. And he's another one of them who has come out and said, well, I'm very opposed to this and we're going to fight this in the House. The thing is, you have no leverage to fight it in the House. None. There is no fight to be had in the House. They don't need Democratic permission to do anything in the House. So Hakeem can be primaried. Chuck Schumer cannot be primaried until the next round of elections after this one. However, there is a vote about who's going to lead the party every time a new Congress is sworn in. So it is time for us to start talking about that and the procedural nature of those votes and how we can go about making it so that somebody else gets voted into power, regardless of what happens next time, whether Democrats take the House, whether they take the Senate, both, neither, whatever happens, we can still replace the leadership of the party. And just like there's a lot of focus going into primaries right now, there needs to be focus on that as well. When those elections come back around, how is leverage going to be utilized to force Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries out? The support for it in the party is there. There's very few people in the party who would defend these two guys. And all it would take is for someone who is like moderately more easy to support, somebody who's promising to oppose the Republican agenda in no uncertain terms and is promising real, actual methodology and, God forbid, policy behind how they plan to do that. And the party's going to get behind that. The party is hungry for different leadership. So while Chuck Schumer and the rest of the Democrats, particularly Chuck Schumer, try to figure out how to regain the narrative and the credibility that he has lost in allowing this vote to happen, we need to start talking seriously about what it looks like to get him out. Who could take that mantle? What does it look like to apply that pressure during those votes? The Republicans have forced the Speaker of the House out like 4 times since Trump came to power. And that's all of them were because Trump decided that he didn't like that guy anymore and wanted somebody else. So it's not impossible to do this. And that is partially how they have reshaped the Republican Party to more consistently move in the direction that Trump wants it to move in, is by just continuing to replace the leadership. So it's time for us to start using that as a model for how we're going to replace the Democratic Party leadership, as well as using the Tea Party model. And the Tea Party model was exactly what is happening in the Democratic Party right now, which is primaries, vicious primaries of the establishment figures in the party by newer faces who are taking on a very specific type of rhetoric. And it's not just we're going to fight Trump and we have to oppose Trump and democracy and blah, 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 but a very specific slate of policies. In the case of the Tea Party, it was anti-tax policy and opposing specific staffing and policy choices of the Obama administration, like what he was doing with the IRS. Those were the Republicans who spoke about that, as well as a sort of Christian nationalist kind of tinge. Those were the ones who received support from the big dollar donors in the Republican Party that have now become the establishment of the Republican Party. So on the other side, on the Democratic side, we're not going to have the big dollar donors. What we have is grassroots power enough to overwhelm any support that establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans have. But we don't have the money that they have. So that's what we're up against. But by starting to talk now about what it looks like to replace Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and who we want to replace them, we can start to build up that grassroots support, connect it to these campaigns. You're going to hear Graham Plattner talking about how Chuck Schumer needs to be replaced, Abdul Al-Sayed talking about how Chuck Schumer needs to be replaced. So not only getting these guys in, getting them past the primary process into the general election, pushing them over the finish line in the general election, but also having the conversation about what's going to happen once this vote is up about who's going to lead the party. We need to talk about that now. And it seems preemptive because we don't even know what the Congress of 2027 is even going to be made up of. But by talking about it now, we can be ready when that happens. Whereas if we're not aware that that is a pressure point that can be used to flip the power dynamic in the Democratic Party, then it's going to pass us by, which it has been doing. That's the reason Chuck Schumer's and Jeffries are still the ones who are in power. They can be replaced. They should be replaced. The party is ready to replace them. And it's time for us to have a continuing conversation about what that looks like. So that's what I'll be doing on this channel. Pressure getting pressed, do you feel it now? What even happens next, I don't really know. Voice carries less, can you hear me now? Soon as I get blessed, time's running out. Pressure getting pressed. Pressure getting pressed. Feel the pressure getting pressed. Yeah. Pressure, do you feel it now? I'm just saying this.